pen felt heavier than it should have. Marcus gripped it with fingers that refused to stop trembling and pressed the tip to the signature line. Across the conference table, three faces watched him, Derek with his arms crossed, Ray studying the wood grain, Nolan sitting in Marcus's usual chair like he'd already moved in. The document between them reduced 7 years to 7 pages. Page 1, the buyout clause. Page 3, the valuation they'd invented. Page 6, the number, $40,000. His 25% stake in Vertex Logistics Consulting, a company independently valued at $2.1 million 6 months earlier, compressed into a figure that wouldn't cover a used sedan. The company attorney cleared her throat. Marcus signed. No negotiation, no handshake. He folded the check once, slid it into his jacket, and walked through the door, past the reception desk he'd built, past the client wall he'd filled, through the parking lot full of contracts he'd closed. The three men he left behind opened a bottle of champagne that afternoon. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. That $40,000 check would become the most expensive mistake of their careers, because 5 years later, Marcus would walk back through those same doors, and the next time, they would be the ones signing. The year Marcus was forced out, Vertex Logistics Consulting billed $2.1 million. That number told one story. The client list told another. 73% of that revenue, $1.53 million, came from accounts Marcus had personally onboarded, nurtured, and retained. He wasn't the face of the company. He was the spine. 4 friends had founded Vertex right out of college. Marcus built the operational backbone, the systems, the workflows, the client relationships that kept contracts renewing year after year. Derek handled sales. Ray managed finances. Nolan ran marketing. On paper, 4 equal partners. In practice, Marcus was the one clients called when something went wrong at 2 in the morning. He was the one who flew to warehouses in Omaha and distribution centers in El Paso. He was the one who remembered that the CFO at Redline Freight had a daughter starting college in September and always asked about her. The clients didn't have a relationship with Vertex. They had a relationship with Marcus. And when Derek, Ray, and Nolan sat in that conference room plotting the buyout, not one of them stopped to calculate what would happen when those relationships walked out the door. On paper, they were equal partners. In reality, one of them was carrying the weight of 3. Marcus met Derek, Ray, and Nolan their sophomore year. 12 years of friendship. 12 years of inside jokes, late-night study sessions that turned into business plans, and a shared dream that became Vertex. They'd signed the operating agreement at Derek's kitchen table over pizza and cheap beer for 23-year-olds who couldn't afford a lawyer. The agreement was boilerplate, downloaded from a legal template website. Page 14 contained a majority vote buyout clause. Any 3 partners could vote to buy out the 4th at a price determined by the majority. Marcus had read it. He hadn't worried about it. These were his brothers. Derek had been his roommate. Ray had loaned him rent money junior year. Nolan had driven 14 hours to help Marcus move his mother into assisted living. You don't hire an attorney to protect yourself from the people who showed up when your mother couldn't remember your name. The trust was absolute. The kind of trust that makes you hand someone a loaded weapon because you're certain, bone-deep certain, they'd never aim it at you. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the vote had already happened, 3 days before anyone told him. The first sign came on a Tuesday in March. Marcus arrived at the office to find Derek's door closed, unusual for a man who left it open on principle. Through the glass, he could see all 3 of them. Derek, Ray, Nolan, talking. No one had invited him. He knocked. The conversation stopped. Derek opened the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just catching up on the quarterly numbers, he said. Weird, because the quarterly numbers were on Marcus's server, and no one had asked him for access. 2 weeks later, Ray migrated all financial records to a new cloud platform. Marcus discovered this when his old login stopped working. A temporary transition, Ray explained. We'll get you set up. The new credentials never came. Then the client emails. Marcus noticed Nolan had stopped CCing him on correspondence with 3 of their largest accounts. When he asked, Nolan shrugged. Just streamlining communication. Every explanation was reasonable on its own. Together, they formed a pattern Marcus couldn't see because he wasn't looking for it. When Marcus proposed expanding into supply chain analytics, all 3 shot it down within minutes. Too risky, Derek said. The disagreement felt strategic. It wasn't. It was a pretext. The next Monday, Marcus walked into a meeting he wasn't invited to. What he heard through the door changed everything. Conference rooms smelled like fresh coffee and old leather. Marcus noticed that first, the smell. Then he noticed the attorney, a woman he'd never met, sitting at the far end of the table with a stack of documents and a pen already uncapped. Derek sat to her left, Ray to her right, Nolan at the head of the table, Marcus's usual seat. Nobody stood when he walked in. Derek cleared his throat. "We've made a decision, Marcus. We're invoking the buyout clause. 3 votes to 1. The attorney slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Marcus picked it up. The number hit him like a fist to the sternum. $40,000. His 25% stake in a company independently valued at $2.1 million 6 months earlier. His share was worth $525,000. They were offering him 7.6% of its actual value. He looked up. Derek wouldn't meet his eyes. Ray studied his fingernails. Nolan stared straight ahead like a man who'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. The attorney explained the terms. 30 days to accept. If he refused, they'd trigger the freeze-out provision, a legal mechanism that would force him out anyway, at a price they'd set. Marcus could have fought it. He could have hired a lawyer, challenged the valuation, dragged it through courts for years. So why did he sign? 7 years. Marcus had poured 7 years of savings, 7 years of weekends, 7 years of missed birthdays, and cancelled vacations into Vertex. His personal checking account held $11,000. His retirement fund, cashed out 3 years ago to cover a cash flow crisis, held nothing. Fighting a forced buyout meant hiring a business litigation attorney. The consultation alone would cost $2,000. A full challenge, discovery, depositions, valuation disputes, court dates, $50,000 minimum, against 3 partners who had the company's legal budget behind them. Marcus did the math on a napkin at a diner that night. He could spend money he didn't have fighting for years in a courtroom, or he could take the $40,000 and walk. There's a legal precedent, Morrow versus Marchink, that says minority discounts shouldn't apply in forced buyout situations. The court ruled that discounting shares when a minority partner is being pushed out unfairly transfers wealth to the majority. It's the right ruling, but that ruling comes at the end of a legal battle, not the beginning. Marcus folded the napkin, put it in his pocket, and drove home. The next morning he signed, but that night, sitting alone in the apartment he'd furnished with thrift store chairs and a desk made from a door, he made a promise to himself. This wasn't surrender. It was the opening move. Marcus packed his desk that Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, the first crack in the foundation had already appeared. Redline Freight was the first to leave. 6 weeks after Marcus cleared out his desk, their VP of operations called Vertex to renegotiate their contract. Derek took the call. He didn't know that the VP's daughter had just started her sophomore year at Michigan, because Marcus was the one who always asked. He didn't know that Redline's distribution network had been restructured in Q2 because Marcus was the one who tracked it. Derek offered a generic retention package. Redline's contract expired 30 days later, then Crossfield Manufacturing, then Pacific Coast Logistics. 3 major clients, gone in 6 months. Revenue that quarter dropped by $412,000. The partners hired a replacement. She quit after 8 months, citing a toxic work environment and no operational documentation, because Marcus had kept most of it in his head. They hired a second replacement. He lasted 5 months. Internal systems started failing. Client deliverables slipped deadlines. Vertex's Glassdoor rating dropped from 4.2 to 2.8 stars. 18 months after Marcus walked out, revenue had fallen 40%. The institutional knowledge that held the company together hadn't lived in any filing cabinet or server. It had lived in one person. And they'd paid him $40,000 to take it with him. While Vertex was bleeding clients, Marcus was building something. Something his former partners wouldn't see coming until it was too late. The spare bedroom measured 10 feet by 12 feet. A folding table from Walmart. A laptop with a cracked hinge. A phone Marcus had bought secondhand. This was Meridian Consulting on day 1. The $40,000, the insult, the lowball, the number designed to erase him, became his startup capital. Marcus didn't advertise. He didn't need to. He called the clients who knew his work, the people who'd watched him solve problems at 2 in the morning, the VPs and operations directors who'd trusted him with their supply chains for years. The first contract signed within 3 weeks. Within 6 months, Meridian had 4 clients. Within a year, 7. By year 2, 3 of those clients were former Vertex accounts, companies that had left not because of price, but because the person they'd actually trusted was gone. Marcus also did something his former partners never expected. He watched. Every quarter, he pulled Vertex's public filings. He tracked their Better Business Bureau complaints. He read their Glassdoor reviews, the ones from departing employees who described chaos, finger-pointing, and a leadership team that couldn't agree on what day it was. Vertex's revenue slid from $2.1 million to $800,000 in 3 years, then $400,000 by year 4. Meanwhile, Meridian crossed $1.4 million. And then Derek made a phone call that changed everything. The phone rang at 8:47 on a Thursday evening. Marcus was at his desk, the real desk now, oak, in the Meridian office he'd leased 2 years ago. He didn't recognize the number. He picked up anyway. "Hey man, it's Derek." 4 years of silence, and Derek opened with "Hey man," like they just missed a lunch date. Marcus said nothing. Let the silence do the work. Derek filled it, said he'd been meaning to reach out, said things had been crazy at Vertex, said he missed the old days. Then his voice cracked. They were 3 months behind on their office lease. Nolan had walked out in January, took his marketing contacts and vanished. Ray had floated the word bankruptcy at their last meeting. Revenue had dropped below $300,000. The company Marcus had built from a kitchen table was bleeding out on a conference room floor. Derek took a breath and said something Marcus had waited 4 years to hear. "Could really use your help, man. Maybe a consulting arrangement, just to get things stabilized." Marcus listened to every word, processed every number, cataloged every detail. Then he told Derek he'd think about it. They said goodbye. Marcus set the phone down, stared at it for exactly 10 seconds. Then he picked it up again and called his attorney. Derek thought he was asking for help. He had no idea he'd just given Marcus every piece of information he needed. The acquisition offer arrived by certified mail on a Monday. Derek and Ray opened it together in the same conference room where they'd handed Marcus his $40,000 check 5 years earlier. Meridian Consulting LLC proposed to acquire Vertex Logistics Consulting, its client contracts, its brand, its intellectual property, its office lease, for $85,000. $85,000. For a company they'd valued at $2.1 million when they pushed Marcus out. The number wasn't accidental. Marcus had set it deliberately, just over double what they'd paid him, close enough to feel the sting, far enough to be legal. Their attorney reviewed the offer. The math was brutal but accurate. Vertex's current revenue was under $300,000. Their debts exceeded $160,000. The office lease alone was $42,000 a year, money they didn't have. An independent valuation would put the company's total worth somewhere between $100,000 and $280,000, and that was being generous. Marcus's offer was fair. Painfully, precisely, deliberately fair. Derek called Marcus the next day, tried to negotiate. Marcus's attorney sent a one-line response. "The offer expires in 14 days. They signed on day 11. Same conference table, different side of the paperwork. Marcus pulled into the Vertex parking lot on a Wednesday morning. His parking spot, the one closest to the building, the one Derek had reassigned the week after the buyout, was empty. He parked in it, walked through the front door, past the reception desk, past the framed photo of the 4 founders that still hung in the hallway. 3 employees were at their desks. 2 of them had been there the day Marcus was pushed out. One of them, Sandra from accounts, looked up, and her hand went to her mouth. Marcus spent the next 6 weeks restructuring. He kept every employee who'd stayed, rebranded the company under Meridian, merged the client lists, rebuilt the operational systems from scratch, the same systems he'd built the first time, updated for 5 years of industry changes. Within 12 months, the combined entity billed $3.2 million, more than Vertex had ever billed under 4 partners. As for those partners, Derek took a middle management position at a logistics firm in Phoenix. Salary, roughly a third of what he'd made as a Vertex partner. Ray left the logistics industry entirely. Last anyone heard, he was selling insurance in Tampa. Nolan, the one who'd sat in Marcus's chair during the ambush, drives for a rideshare company. His rating is 4.6 stars. 3 men sat in a conference room and decided that the 4th was expendable. They offered him $40,000 for a quarter of everything he'd built. They thought they were removing a problem. They were removing the foundation. 5 years later, the man they erased bought back everything they'd destroyed for barely twice what they'd paid him to leave. The business math of betrayal is simple. Marcus walked out with $40,000. He walked back in for $85,000. And within a year, he'd built a $3.2 million operation on top of the ashes. That check for $40,000, it wasn't a buyout. It was startup capital. Karma doesn't always arrive fast. Sometimes it takes 5 years, a spare bedroom, and a folding table from Walmart. But when it arrives with a certified letter and a 14-day deadline. I'd rate this karma a 9 out of 10. Not a 10, because Marcus didn't get those 7 years back, but a 9. Because every single morning, Derek, Ray, and Nolan wake up knowing that the man they pushed out now owns everything they threw away. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone ever looked at what you built and decided you were replaceable, this one's for you. Subscribe to the Karma Case, because karma always collects.